Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. JACALYN. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacqueline at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. Our show today is the Business Talk Show. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK. I'm the president, founder, and chief listening officer here at our network of TV, radio, and podcast shows each and every week. I share this space with a dear friend, mentor, and someone I have the utmost respect for. His name is Al CINI. Let's welcome him. Hello.
Dr. JACALYN, thanks for inviting me today. It's so good to be here.
Thank you for being here. You know, Al, we've been doing this show together for so long. I don't remember how many episodes it is, but it's, I don't know, 110 or something.
Or 108, a lot, quite a few.
A lot of shows. We've had amazing guests on, and we've got a guest backstage we're going to bring out in a couple of minutes. But he actually is someone who has a perspective that I don't believe we've heard before on this platform. And I'm not going to spoil what it is he's going to discuss today, but we are going to be looking at millennials. We're going to be looking at financing, and we'll be looking at financial advisors, just to tee it up. So before we bring him out, I want to talk about you and the work that you're doing with ProFit and BCAT. Tell us more about that.
Well, ProFit, BCAT, for people who might be following our program and maybe have paid a little bit of attention to some of the Talking Heads programs I've done. ProFit is a marriage of two different coaching systems. We developed a brand and cultural alignment toolkit as a way of helping an organization find its heart and soul. Lisa Manioki for years has been working on a coaching platform that she calls Presence Intelligence. We found that when we combine those two, we can create a 3-hour, basically half-day team building experience that from soup to nuts reconnects a company or a team or a group of people with their reason for being, helps them find their why, and also helps them express that as a role model and then use that as a pattern of behavior that they can follow in order to become the best possible contributors to the purpose of their team that they can possibly be. It's a fun half-day experience that is data-driven, but it's not data-heavy, and it moves along very quickly, and everybody gets a voice in the process, regardless of their rank or seniority, whether they started with the company yesterday or have been with it for 30 years. And that's ProFit. We're excited about it, and we're rolling it out as we speak. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, best wishes on that. And for our audience, please do go over and watch Al's Talking Heads episodes. You can find them on USA Global TV and Radio on your YouTube channel. Go to playlist, Talking Heads 2022, and also Talking Heads Al CINI. All right, Al, the moment has come where we're going to unveil our fabulous guest who is here.
I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this.
I'm excited too. He was here last week on The Wise Ones with Red O'Loughlin, and I'm always super excited when I ask a guest to come back and book on another show because I feel like there's so much more that we didn't even get to tap into. As you know, it's a 40-minute show. So Joseph DiGIulio is a former college and professional athlete in the area of tennis, and he now is somebody who is excelling in the industry of financial services. And I had teed up a question with him backstage about the fact that I had heard that financial advisors need to have a huge established network and they need to have a lot of experience when it comes to investing. We're going to hear what he has to say about that. Let's bring him out. Welcome to the show, Joseph.
Thank you both for having me on. Al, it's a pleasure getting to meet you. Dr. JACALYN, pleasure as always. I was going to say, going to Al's point, first off, having that why, I know we discussed it with read in our last conversation. But on the flip side, and I apologize, I believe I have a gardener here that's in the backyard right now. But I was going to say, when it comes to COVID, when it comes to millennials and kind of deciphering this world of finance, let's call it, I will say that I think the first thing is to not overcomplicate things. It's to keep things efficient, simplistic, and then also understand that, for example, one of the best books that I recently read was The Psychology of Money. And the psychology of money, we can definitely get more into in this conversation if prevalent. But thank you both for having me on, and I look forward to having a great conversation.
Wow. There's a lot of weight in what you just said, and there are a couple of things that you just moved me in two different directions, Joseph, all at the same time. I'm appalled and amazed at the number of millennials. We've talked about this a little bit before the program. The number of 30-year-olds who still don't write their own checks and don't pay their own bills, whose parents still do it for them. I'm amazed by that. I'm aware of a bunch. I could tell you a story of a friend of mine who went through her trash one day and found money in it and couldn't figure out what money was doing in her trash until she found out that one of her children, who is 36 years old, by the way, said, I can't be bothered with that. It's dollars and quarters and nickels and pennies, and I just throw it out. I swear, this is not a lie. It is the truth. This is a true story. So on the one hand, we've got this gigantic problem of people not understanding money and not really having any respect for it, especially young people, and a society that doesn't seem to care about that. They're not doing anything about it. They're not creating curricula in schools to fix it. They're not creating any programs to try to address it. On the other hand, we've got your problem. Your problem is you want to help people who have this, but you can't sound judgy or preachy or critical of them, because that's the last thing they need in this vulnerable state that they're in. It sounds to me like you're walking a tightrope, Joseph. How do you do that?
It's a very fine balance, which you bring up a great point on. Financial advisors, financial specialists that work with people on a daily basis, for that sake, they are under a lot of scrutiny in general, just as a, let's just say, type of formality of name they've been given over the years, and some of the bad advisors or experiences with Bernie Madoff's that we've seen. And so there has been a lack of trust with many parts of the financial industry. And I think that when I look at the financial industry as a whole, the biggest issues are two things. One is that we have a lot of financial advisors that have a lot of insurance and financial companies that are very much so incentivizing them to push certain products on people and not give them that full spectrum of understanding all of their options. And then on the flip side, you have people that look at, especially in the millennial group, that look at all the things that have taken place, especially with cryptocurrency, with the stock market over the past couple of years. Of course, we're going through more of a recessionary period now, but there was people that were always kind of coming out of the gates, out of college, thinking I can capitalize on my brokerage account. And, really, I would consider it unrealistic expectations of what they're doing with some of their investments in dollars. And then going to your point, there's all these low-hanging fruits, as I would like to call it, of ways that people can simply, by knowing what they can take advantage of, especially with some of the newer tax regulations and incentives put in by the Biden administration, that people just need to be aware of. And so it's a weird world we're living in. And I think, like you said, Al, it really starts with literacy on both fronts, the financial advisory side as well as the client side.
Yeah,
So,
great points. Something I just wanted to mention about that, it came up in an earlier show today, and I think it was really precipitated by COVID. But we did see signs many places where we don't have change, or, don't use change, use your cards. And I think part of what's happened is we're so used to pulling out a card. If we had a stack of money sitting there and we had to actually watch the money go down, 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 we might make different choices than just pulling out a card and tapping it and go, and not really making that connection. So I think that it also starts with an awareness that money actually represents something, and we have to learn to respect it and understand it.
100%. And Al, I'll ask you this. I'm sure you remember pretty clearly in 2008 and '09 with the housing crisis and with the crash of the stock market, just all of the experiences that plenty of people went through. And the only reason why I bring that up to you is because millennials didn't go through that many times. So they haven't experienced some of the issues and just typical trends that we're going to go through throughout our lives, right? We're kind of a piece of what we've experienced so far to whatever extent it is. And so when I look at millennials, oftentimes we've had such a bullish stock market or positive stock market for so long that hitting a recessionary period is completely new to them. They're not used to an '08. They're not used to an .com bubble crash. And so I think those experiences through storytelling, even oftentimes of clients that have gone through that, it helps kind of give a little bit more perspective, because one of the biggest things that you can create for a young millennial is perspective, ideally beyond their years as of current. That's just my take, of course. I'd love to hear your opinion, Al, on that.
well, yeah, I before we talk about what I think, and by the way, I'm old enough to remember 88, 84, 78, 76. I mean, there's always a wave coming, and you've always got to grab your board and get ready to ride it. That's just sort of the way it is. And I think you're right. An awful lot of people, young people, never having experienced any of that, just believe that everything just chugs along and they never really need to worry about it. Because, but before we get into that, because I think Dr. JACALYN's absolutely right. We're separated from the value of money by all these symbols and systems we've created, which really clouds our judgment and blurs our common sense. But before we talk about all that craziness, what do you do? I know, Joseph, you're a financial advisor, but you mentioned some financial advisors sell products. That's not you, right? You're not selling insurance, or are you? I mean, tell me what it is you do.
So I work across the board. So anything from, I'll use an easy analogy here. If I was, say, a football coach, we have, in terms of our practice at DiGIULio Financial, we're working on the offensive side of the field. So looking to grow out capital, do so efficiently, and really have those numbers go into Dr. JACALYN's point, driven at specific goals rather than just a number per se, right? And then on the flip side, being, say, a defensive coordinator or running the defense of a football team, you're managing risk. And people don't oftentimes realize that as a millennial, your biggest asset until the day that you achieve financial independence or retire is your ability to earn an income. Because without earning that income, if you were to have a premature disability or, X, Y, or Z were to happen, you're really going to have a setback of being able to invest dollars and even look at options in the first place, right?
Well, so so your job as an advisor then is to be neutral with respect to what your clients actually buy. You're more concerned with what your clients' problems are and what they're actually trying to build for themselves.
Correct. My job is to be a great question asker, to get to know someone in the sense of, even, for example, I'll give you a story here. So let's take a very common trend. Young millennials, oftentimes, where do they start? Putting money into a Roth IRA and building that out for the future. And so with a Roth IRA, oftentimes the first question I'll ask someone is, what is the biggest pro and what is the biggest con you see to your Roth IRA? And it's not because I have, an answer I want to fill them on with. It's more so for me to understand why they're doing this in the first place, why their train of thought is leading them to make certain decisions. And then I think throughout having a very open-ended conversation that is not too, inducive on certain, strategies per se, then it allows us to kind of just really take a step back, paint that, artist-like 1,000-foot overview scope, and create the roadmap for them to decide if they're going to take, say, the 405 or the 5, if we're talking about Southern California freeways as a analogy here. But at least they know the routes and they have a roadmap that they can decide, okay, now this is going to be the most efficient way based off of my belief around finances. Because some people are always going to be more inducive to being aggressive, being more risk tolerant, and there's so many just other aspects that come into account for each and every person for that matter.
Okay. And you mentioned California. You're based in California, is that right, Joe?
Correct.
Okay. So are you licensed to serve clients anywhere in the country, or where are your clients typically?
So my clients and our advisors' clients are based throughout the entire country. The majority of my clients are actually not in California. And so I know it's a little silly because I'm here in Newport Beach, where we're based as a firm with our headquarters, right? But we actually now are working internationally as well. And so I think that for us, it's not, sectored off to a certain portion of the country, but with COVID, especially as you've seen with a lot of businesses, it's allowed you to really have a lot of influence and, ability to get in contact with and build great relationships with people all around the world for that matter. So it's pretty wide open ended with the licenses of where I can work.
Great.
So it sounds like the industry's really changed from the days of you had to be on Wall Street.
And the thing about Wall Street is it's never fully lost its, let's call it, quota around being, slam and damn and very just quick driven transactions of, heavy hedge funds and so forth that are, looking to acquire clients pretty rapidly and having aggressive sales tactics. But I will say that for more of a family home office style firm like myself, with DiGIULio Financial, and by family home office, I just mean that we're covering such a broad spectrum of areas. It's easier for us to not dive into a multitude of areas if need be, but keep it very simplified in the sense of, this is what is out there for a client or for someone to learn about. There's maybe a great book or some great, stories of personal clients that I'm working with right now. But at the end of the day, I think that simplicity and really understanding that person's, back end psychology thinking as well is going to be huge always, because with every financial plan that you do create, even if it's enacted and someone moves forward with some of your suggestions, if they don't maintain a discipline, they're not necessarily going to see success with that plan long term. Wall Street is very short term thinking for the most part. They have stockholders to answer to. They've got a lot of quarterly revenue reports and everything that's going to influence their public equities, going market rate or price, right? And so when you kind of take that out of the picture and you're allowing someone to not just see short term, but what they're able to accomplish, especially as a millennial long term, with compounding interest being a huge part, as you both know, it just opens their eyes, I think, to a little bit more than they thought off the first place, thinking more short term in general.
Okay. How do you get a millennial to think long term? I mean, I know a few. I'm related to a few. I don't want to get too specific here because
maybe not after this. No kidding.
Yeah, I may not. I may have considerably fewer younger friends after all this. But how do you? A lot of them are very focused on the next rave, the next concert, the next. I mean, it doesn't seem like they think much further ahead than maybe a week or two. I don't know what your
You're
experience
completely
is.
right.
How do you get them to think like, what if they're going to live to be 60, 70, 80, maybe even 90 or 100, the way things are going? How do you get them to think about the condition they're going to be in when that time comes?
So Dr. JACALYN made a great point when she was talking about numbers and it not being, of course, the driving factor always when it comes to finances. But what I will say is that when you are able to listen, hear someone out, and start creating that full picture and scope of what it's going to look like for them at 30 years old, being able to buy that investment property, having the stability for their future family they want to have and what that looks like at 40 years old. And all of the intangibles, non-numbers related, but purely around the things that they love to enjoy in their life, the things that they want to accomplish. And I know I mention this quite often, but personally, professionally, and financially, they're so intertwined. I think that story of what they're going to be looking at as of today, and that story along the lines of retirement not being maybe an age and a number, but more so, by the way, when we look at your retirement plan, I know it's 30 plus years out many times, right? What is that going to look like in your case? Maybe that is having the ability to travel the world like you've always wanted. That is the ability to start that charity and donate potentially to the church that you've gone to for your entire life. Maybe that's involving with the planning of having kids, because many times millennials are, of course, starting families later nowadays, right? Maybe it's a conversation around how they're going to be able to be impactful on their kids' future education and other aspects. And I think a lot of it oftentimes comes from inherent qualities or perspectives that they've gotten from people that they've been close to throughout their life. And I do think universities can play a huge part in that as well.
Yeah, something I wanted to add is thank you, first of all, for all that information. I have several family members. I'm not going to say who they are, but they're extremely successful, 30, 32, 34, 26. And they own multiple homes. They own stocks. I mean, real estate. And I believe that a lot of it has to do with someone in our family who was a great influence to them, who taught them some things about money and about the future and about taking care of your family. And so it's really eye-opening because they teach me things, believe it or not. And I'm very open to learn because I see what it is that they've accomplished. And I think, wow, at their age, I was nowhere near. I'm probably not today either. So it's just kind of interesting. I guess it goes on a case-by-case basis.
And you do bring up a great point. And the one thing I would add to that, Dr. JACALYN, is a lot of millennials in this saturated marketplace with so much being thrown at them, with not maybe having that literacy. It's just purely not knowing where to start. And whether you start maybe in the best spot possible with investing, putting dollars away, creating just a financial roadmap for your future, it's better to start somewhere than to start nowhere at all. So a lot of people hold off because they're so confused around, do I look at this? Do I think about, the stock market more so? Do I just focus on my savings? Do I need to be more just tax conscious for the time being? But oftentimes you'll start seeing that, and I'll give, a lot of millennial friends that I have on this topic as well that fit into the scope. They just don't purely know where to start. And if you don't start somewhere, I mean, you're really not going to, start building and taking advantage of your young age to begin with.
Yeah, I agree. Just to follow up, one of my family members and I went out paddleboarding, like hardcore paddleboarding, not just like la la la. We were caught against the current, and we were talking business the entire time. It was so stimulating because I love to talk about business. So I would just encourage people out there, family members who have millennials in their family, get out there and talk to them. Like, do something, spend time with them. And when the subject comes up of finances, teach them what you know, and then listen to what they have to say. Maybe there's some things they've heard about, or crypto, NFTs, whatever it is, and maybe you'll learn something as well as them learning something.
It could be we can learn things from kids. But I have another piece of advice. If there's a millennial out there that doesn't have a financial advisor, they're earning money and they're building a life, but they're not really thinking it through, or they're not sure that their plan is the right plan for them because they don't have the expertise to do that themselves, they should call Joseph, hook up with him, and then they can brag to mom and dad about how they have a financial advisor. Because I can tell you, when mom and dad hear that their child has gone off and retained a financial advisor on their own, it's very reassuring to a parent to hear your kids thinking along those lines.
And Joseph, you work with other people as well. It doesn't have to be millennials, right?
No, millennials I love to talk about because of, I just think, so much awareness that needs to be brought to that aspect of finance. But I will say that the majority of my clients are typically between the ages of 30 and 60, oftentimes business owners. And the reason why I mention business owners is because they have so many more options, even from, say, an IRS tax planning and being efficient with their assets when it comes to sheltering from the IRS in a compliant way, and just with so many involvements with IRS codes constantly. Business owners, especially small business owners, they oftentimes don't know that they're the most incentivized group by the IRS. They have so many opportunities for deductions, for bonus plans, for creating all of these things that oftentimes lead to the failure of businesses that are successful. And one example I'll just share with you that you both are probably well aware of is a buy-sell agreement. So two business owners that get into business together and have a successful company, let's just say a restaurant as an example, if they have some sort of formality where one is disabled for a period of time, one is wanting out of the company, et cetera, oftentimes that other business owner doesn't want to get involved with maybe their family members that don't understand the business as well as their business partner does, right? Or there might be other scenarios taking place, and not having a buy-sell agreement, which is that arrangement between partners, and also funding it properly, which can oftentimes be done with tax-deductible dollars as well. It's really one of the biggest downfalls you'll see to so many small businesses and closely held partnerships across the country.
How did you get into this, Joseph? I mean, at what point did you decide you didn't want to be a drummer? You didn't want to be a DJ. This is what you wanted to do. How did that happen?
I think that I really was, after I graduated from UCLA, in such a tough spot of deciding whether to pursue professional tennis still. I was directing tennis in Lido Island in Newport Beach. And I really, to give you my story, I woke up one day and I just told myself, and this is nothing to do against tennis coaches or college coaches, because I work with, for example, so many great tennis coaches out there across the country, but it wasn't for me. And I started just looking around with some of my affiliates in some of the industries I was particularly interested in. And I ended up dabbling into a boutique firm here in Newport Beach, where I started off. And I really took a liking to not only the financial side, but also getting to know people and the relationship building and really the listening and question asking skills, which all goes into the psychology side, which I know as of now is really just as important as them understanding, in this case being a client, understanding what's out there investment wise. If you can't understand what they've been through, what they may prioritize when it comes to what keeps them up at night, what is maybe something that they're concerned about for the future or excited about. I mean, it can be very fun conversations as well, right? And so I think those conversations and being able to build these relationships that are not purely driven around numbers is really what has made me feel kind of like a therapist in a way, if that makes sense. But not to get, too much into the therapeutic aspect, but really combining all of these areas that I think it really helps a client to resonate with what they're ultimately going to decide is best for them. And one thing which I know I mentioned earlier is starting from somewhere, right?
Right. Well, let me tee you up with a challenge. Here's a challenge question for you. Millennials are turning 40. Actually, they're pushing 40 years old. I mean, we keep thinking of them as kids, but they're really not chronologically anymore anyway. Kids, they're growing up. They've got six-figure incomes. They maybe are on their second or third jobs. They're developing careers. And every now and then they've got a great uncle who'll keel over and die and leave them money. So let's start with this crazy question of a millennial who just turning 40 and gets left a chunk of money by somebody in their family. And they come to you and they say, you know what, Joseph, I think the right thing to do is for me to take this big check, cash it, and put it all in Tesla stock. Now, how does the psychologist, Joseph, deal with that kind of logic and that kind of thinking?
So I think that, and I don't want to be repetitive here, but it starts off with asking questions the right way. So if someone was to come to me in that scenario and throw out putting all of that money into Tesla stock, I would first off ask them what their train of thought of thinking was of why they wanted to make that decision, maybe what their risk tolerance was. But I think ultimately as well, helping them through asking questions as well around what they understand when it comes to inheritance. Do they understand the implications from a tax perspective? Do they understand the factor that if they do put all their money in Tesla, that they could be losing and waking up one day and seeing their entire inheritance having a 20-30% drop potentially? Because ultimately when we break it down, with a country that has inflation at really, I would say, substantially high triggers, let's just call it, even the CPI data, the consumer price index, which you've seen with, gas prices and oil prices. And even as of recently, you're going to see with Saudi Arabia and the Middle East cutting back on their supply of oil to the US because of our initiative on the climate change aspect. But all of these, just formalities, It's not that they're working against people in the long run, ideally, but it is something that you have to just combat efficiently. And so I guess going to your point, I really would need to understand what they know about an inheritance, why they want to get into Tesla in this example, right? And what would achieve by even investing in Tesla in the first place. Because when we connect all these dots, then we can start having a more formidable conversation around me potentially, and most of the time, not even sharing one single suggestion, but gathering all of the data and all of the personal information they want to share with me, and letting myself and my team of specialists at our firm go back to the drawing board and come back to them and say, based off of your, say, top 3 priorities being wanting to maximize your inheritance for the next 20 years, making sure that it lasts throughout perpetuity or the rest of your life, and that you can also leave a legacy behind. And I'm just giving examples here, right? But once I can kind of bring that financial story and plan around for them, oftentimes you'll see that that Tesla all-in investment might end up changing into, let's just say, more of a diversified approach.
That was the word I was looking for, diversification.
Right.
Exactly.
Hedging your bet.
You'll see, Dr. JACALYN, that even in the 90s, there was a man by the name of Eugene Fama and Mark Markowitz that won a Nobel Prize for creating what we call modern portfolio theory. And not to get into all of the tangibles about it, but essentially all it was getting at is the fact that if you do not have a diversified portfolio throughout your life, you're at some point subject to about a 99% chance of having a huge drawback with a recession or some period of time in your life where you're going to see substantial losses in your finances. So, Nobel Prizes are respectable, and I think it just goes to your point on, the diversity side of things.
Absolutely. You
It's
can't
great
put all
to
your
have
eggs in one basket.
somebody with a level head that you can call when you've got these urges and impulses, when you're not sure. I mean, most people fly blind, I think, when it comes to money. They're on autopilot. They're doing what they see on the news or doing what they hear their other people are doing. And that's never a good way to move forward. So, believe me, I'm a huge fan of working with a financial advisor to make sure that whatever plan you have is a good plan, a solid plan, that it looks around the corners and has a long view of where you expect your life to take you, and not just this year or next year. And so, Joseph, it's a great service. Good for you. Do you help people invest in stocks? You're not a stockbroker, are you?
So we have, so I personally am not focused on the public securities and public equity side. However, we do have CFP specialists with DiGIULio Financial. We have an in-house tax department that is ran by Ann Noblet, and she was one of the partners and leaders for all of international tax planning for Deloitte for over a decade, with KPMG for over a decade. So I think that oftentimes one of the things too that millennials and income earners that start getting into higher tax brackets miss out on is a lot of my conversations don't even want to originate around you investing money or looking at money that you have in X, Y, or Z, but how can we design and work with our tax specialists as well to recapture some IRS lost dollars and have some more dollars at work for you that you wouldn't have had in the first place. So taking a business owner as an example, oftentimes we might look at a 162, which is IRS code 162 bonus plan, which in many formalities we can structure to guarantee a retirement pension for them with completely tax deductible dollars. So there's a lot of interesting strategies out there, and I think just going to both of your points, so conducive of just really who you're working with and what their priorities are.
Thank you, Joseph. You have brought another wealth, no pun intended, of information here today. So thank you very much. For people who are interested in hiring you, working with your firm, or maybe they want to reach out and just get some advice about how you're doing what you're doing, how can people reach out to you, especially if they're listening on the radio or a podcast platform?
So the best way to reach out to me, I would always encourage, I think the modern day, let's say resume or live resume of where people are at is LinkedIn. So I'm always available on LinkedIn to be reached out to. My personal website for my company that is being evolved into an international insurance and investment company that I'm really excited about called Janelma. That's janelma.com. You can always go onto there and you can insert your information if you want to be contacted, and we can always grab a conversation through that platform as well. And then I think below it, my direct email is on there and my direct cell. And I would say that I always enjoy open-minded people that nonetheless want to have a conversation around some aspect of what they might be doing or looking at with their personal planning.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And I just want to read your email address for anyone who can't read the banner. It's Joseph, JOSEPH at DIGIULIOOC.com. And his cell phone number is 949-290-5411. Thank you very much, Joseph. I really enjoyed seeing you again.
Thanks. Great conversation.
Thank you both for having me on.
Real
Pleasure to meet you. And I'll
totally
enjoy watching this at some point. But I really will say finally that going to everything we talked about, it's really just starting somewhere. And starting somewhere is better than starting nowhere when it comes to financial planning.
So
and
true.
Starting now instead of later is good advice too, right?
Great, Joe.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again. Bye for now. Well, that was very informative, wasn't it, Mr. CINI?
It was, and it's a subject that most people don't know anything about, and even some senior people like me, for example, can learn more about it. I mean, we can always stand to learn more about it. It's you're never too old to make a stupid mistake, and
right.
But it's harder to make that mistake when you're connected with somebody who can give you advice and could help you think it through. And there ought to be somebody before you're about to pull the trigger on anything dumb that you think you might be doing. It's always helpful to be able to call somebody who knows better, have them think about it on your behalf, and then 99% of the time, probably you won't pull the trigger. You'll pull back and you can save yourself. What was that Gordon Gekko quote? A fool and his money are lucky enough to get together in the first place.
I thought it was a fool and his money are soon parted. Maybe that was the Bible.
Parted, but no, he added a fool and his money are lucky enough to get together in the first place. So. Yeah, funny.
I just want to say that I really appreciated the fact that Joseph apparently didn't think I would remember 2008 or 2009. So I'm celebrating that.
He figured I would. He looked at me, he looked at you and said, there's no way. But me, I mean, no, I don't just remember COVID, honey. I remember all the way back to the Spanish flu, 1917. Let me tell you something. That was a tough time.
Oh, you crack me up. Well, Al, once again, another great show. And I've got the boys waiting for me for the men's show. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you? And who would you like to contact you to sign up for this ProFit workshop that you have to offer?
If you're a business owner or a business leader or a manager inside of a large company and you're wondering what to do at your next Zoom meeting, because your Zoom meetings are becoming repetitive and people aren't paying attention, you feel like you're losing your audience in those Zoom meetings. We have a way to take a Zoom meeting, a half-day Zoom meeting, and create a turning point for your organization in that Zoom meeting. And that's what ProFit does. So I hope you'll call 212-480-3730 or send me an email, al.cini, al.cini at getbcat, bcat.com. And let's get a conversation going about what you're trying to accomplish and see if we can't be a fit for it.
I will make sure that I send you an email, Al. I just want you to know that.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that. I'll look for that. Definitely.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Please do reach out to Al. Seriously, we've been together doing this show for almost 2 years, right? It's got to be
pushing over 2, I think. Now we're
over 2 years.
Yeah,
It's
and it's been great. They've all been great. It's absolutely great working with you, Doc. And there are plenty more opportunities to come, I'm sure. And I'm just glad to be along for the ride. Thank you.
Listen, I'm happy that you're here with me because I couldn't do it without you. This is the Business Talk Show.
Yes, it is. Yes, ma'am.
All right, I'm going to say we're leading right now, and the gentlemen who are wild at heart, Bonfire Talks, a show for men, by men, about men, will be coming up right after this. I'll be producing, and I look forward to watching everybody watching. So thank you again. If you're on our YouTube channel, please do subscribe at USA Global TV and Radio. Bye, Al. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Doc.
Bye, Joe.